What if the secret to explosive business growth isn't found in better marketing, tighter budgets, or even smarter strategy, but in how you share the rewards of success with your team? Today's guest, Rob Gallaher, literally wrote the book on this topic, and I'm glad he's here with us today to talk about it. Over the past decade, he's been refining a system that transforms workplaces by aligning the interests of employees and employers through profit sharing. His book, Profit Sharing, The Power of Shared Success, is part roadmap, part revelation, and 100% relevant for leaders who want to build cultures of trust, performance, and loyalty. Rob is here to challenge the way you think about compensation, motivation, and long-term business success, and to share stories of companies that got it right and others that didn't. If you're wondering how to engage your workforce more deeply, reduce turnover, and unlock discretionary effort you didn't know was possible, then this conversation's for you. Rob, super glad to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mason. I'm excited to talk about profit sharing and alchemy and how we can turn lead into gold.
Amen, brother. So, hey, take us back to the moment that you first realized that traditional compensation models were broken, and what happened and what did it make, I guess, how'd that start? What kind of questions did it make you start asking?
Well, when I was a construction superintendent working for someone else, it was a large company. I was running 35 guys myself. We had a painting division that was like 3 times that size. And so there's all kinds of project managers and estimators and superintendents working together every day. And I was frustrated daily by people just not caring. They were there to clock in and they cared about that check on Friday. But when it really came down to the details and going the extra mile, I didn't see a lot of urgency when things would pop up. And so that's when it first started, right? And then when I started my own company, I was seeing the same things. And then that's when I started down that journey of searching for a better way, or there has to be another way. I didn't know what it was. I had no idea, but there just had to be a better way to where I wasn't going to be that business owner like my previous employer was, which is always cracking the whip, always micromanaging, always double checking everything. My boss at that job would always say double check, triple check. And that was just his way of just pounding in our heads that to checking the details and following through on everything. And it's a great saying. I still use it to this day. But the question I asked myself was, how do we get this as a culture where we don't have to say stuff like that to make sure the details and that urgency is always there?
Because it's been my experience that part of my core business has been around employee selection and the use of tools that can measure things like work ethic and reliability. And parents don't teach selective values. Parents who took the time to teach their child that honesty is the best policy typically teach them things like an honest day's work for an honest day's pay and so on and so forth. And I strive to help clients identify those folks that have work ethic and are reliable, and also identify the high risk ones as well. Obviously, avoid the high risks and welcome the folks that have the traits and characteristics and work ethic. But even if you have, and that's half of the battle, but the other half is to have a culture that nourishes that and doesn't discourage or drive those people away. If you got someone who's got a work ethic and they're reliable and they're honest and they're hardworking, they come and they want to bring it every day, and they're surrounded by a bunch of people who are cutting corners and taking shortcuts and going half speed. It's not typically the guy that comes in, there's a hard charger that at a peer level gets everyone to elevate. It's the rest of the guys going, well, why are you working so hard? You're making us look bad. And they drag everyone else down with them. So I'm very interested in hearing about your experiences with how to engage a culture so that it isn't toxic and it is productive. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that business leaders have about profit sharing, and why is it holding them back?
There's a lot of fear out there about, business is hard, right? And as a business owner, there's a lot of worry and fear about making the next payroll and sales maintaining, and what are they doing to have a consistency in the cash flow of the business. And that's one of the first questions I get is when they hear about profit sharing and they hire me to help them set it up, or they read the book and we start that discussion, is how much is this going to cost me? Right? What's the ROI on this? Business owners, they always go, if I'm going to buy this $10,000 worth of lumber, what can I charge to put it in? Or what do I make on it when I sell this product, or whatever the situation is? And so they don't, a lot of business owners, by the time they get to this point, they've been to leadership training. They've read a book about culture. They may have hired some consultants over the years. And so they've already tried some things throughout their history of a business owner to improve sales and culture and all these things. And sometimes they didn't see results, right? A lot of times it's badly implemented, or they weren't looking or measuring the right things. It was communicated poorly, or whatever the reason may be. So now they become this fearful, what's the ROI on this? Is this going to even work? Maybe I've tried some stuff like this before. Or the classic one is I give bonuses out and nothing happens. I don't see a change, right? And so that's a huge fear and a huge concern that they have. And I address all those, and I have ways. And if you follow the rules in my profit sharing program, that fix that.
Because I look at it in terms of business owners sitting there saying, what is this going to cost me? I'm like, what's it going to cost you if you don't? It's interesting to me that if you look at the Gallup surveys about employee engagement, it's not a glowing report on the American workforce. What 16.5% of the population is actively disengaged and hostile, trying to cause damage to the employer. Roughly 52% of the people are at best sleepwalking through the day, hoping not to get fired. And companies are looking at paying higher and higher wages, and they're sitting there saying, hey, they may have 100 employees, and they're thinking, man, we got double the work coming in. We need 200 employees. Maybe they don't. Maybe they got 100 employees that are operating at 50% effort and could get the work done if they were engaged. But then that's the crux of the issue, is how do you get these employees engaged? And that's why I'm very, very curious about the story of profit sharing. I would argue that whatever you think you're going to lose in learning how to share profit is a fraction of what you would save by increasing the engagement of your workforce. Has that
Yeah,
been your
correct.
experience?
Absolutely. So when I started my company, I lost my job from the 0809 housing crisis. My employer was in the retail construction industry. And once people started losing homes, they weren't spending any money. And so a lot of our customers started tightening up their budgets. Long story short, I found my wife was pregnant with our second child. We lost our home. We were part of the problem, the housing crisis. And I had to feed my kids, and we moved into a rental, and I had to pay rent. And I started this company, and we were successful financially right off the bat. Like, I just started, I was lean and mean, and a lot of companies were getting out of the way. They were closing their doors. So it kind of created opportunity for whatever work was out there. So fast forward 3 years, I wake up one day, or I look around one day, and I have 30 employees. We're making money, and everything looks and feels pretty good. But I'm working 70 hours a week. My second year in business, I decided to start a 24-hour plumbing service company, and did not realize the impact of hours, 7 days a week, on the emergency services stuff that I had to do and contribute to get that company off the ground. So I didn't see my kids that much. My wife was extremely supportive, but our marriage was stagnant, right? There was not a lot of time spent together. And so I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way. I knew a lot of business owners, subcontractors, or my customers, and I didn't like what I saw. You see a man or woman in their 50s and 60s, they've been doing it 30 plus years. Yes, they have a nice car, a nice house, and some zeros, in their bank account, but they're on their third or fourth marriage. They don't have a great relationship with their kids. They don't look peaceful, right? They just look stressed. Their health is suffering. Most of them were alcoholics. And I thought to myself, that's not a road that I want to go down. And there has to be, the question I asked myself was, there has to be a business owner path that didn't destroy the individual along the way, where the business became the identity of that person and their life. So I started reading, Mason, and I read everything. I just Googled one day business books. I read books on operation, culture, marketing, sales, whatever I could get my hands on. And I started implementing these little things in my business that I was learning. And one day I stumbled across this idea of profit sharing, which is a fascinating buzzword, right? Everyone loves to hear about profit sharing. If you're an employee, you want to know about it because you instantly think, I'm going to get more money. When you're a business owner, the theory of an engaged team and a unified team all going in one direction is a very appealing thought, because most business owners struggle with that.
Well, not only that, but I think that you've got business owners that, especially if they're entrepreneurial, they think no one cares as much as I do. No one can do this as well as I can do it. And
Right.
what happens if I turn this loose but if they find a way to make their employees owners and share in the rewards, then all of a sudden that takes away a lot of that fear that you might have been talking about earlier, where like, well, what's this going to cost me? Well, you just laid it out. If you don't do it, it's your marriage, it's your health, it's all these other things, your reputation, versus being able to let go a little bit of that fear of the unknown and say, you know what, I would work harder for a share of the profit. These people will too. And maybe they will care as much about this as I do, or almost as much as I do. And that's got to be a tough shift for some folks mentally. But I bet once they do it, the pressure comes off their shoulders. So what's been your experience with business owners and getting them to make that leap?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because if you asked 100 business owners, what's your number one problem in running your business? 99 of them are going to have an answer that's somewhere along the line. My team, my employees don't think, care, or work like I do.
That's exactly what popped into my head.
Right. 100%, probably 100% of them are going to say some answer with the variation of those three things. So I had the same issue, right? I was micromanaging the copier paper, how much we bought and what brand and what the cost of it was. I was worried about the coffee, like just these stupid little things. I'm supposed to be running 30 people and increasing sales and making the budgets and getting the financials done and making sure everyone's doing their job. And I'm worried about the toilet paper in the bathroom, right? Because no one else seemed to care. So profit sharing feels like that it can bridge that gap, right? Every business owner is going to be over here. They're going to have a team, their employees at first over here, and it's like two teams fighting, and profit sharing bridges that gap, right? If why is a business owner motivated is the next question I'd like to throw out there is because we get paid when we win, right?
That's
We don't
true.
get paid for showing up. We don't get paid for clocking in. We don't get paid for making that one sell. We get paid when the company wins and the
And you
team.
pay when you lose.
Right. So, and also there's a negative, right? So if you lose, you have to pay out, right? So
Yes.
we're obviously business owners are extremely motivated people. They know what's at stake. A lot of times their house, everything that they own is on the line. And so unifying your team with profit sharing changes that dynamic. You can stop calling them employees and calling team members. And we might be getting a little off track here, but one of the biggest personal rewards that I've gotten for profit sharing has nothing to do with financial is I didn't feel alone when I was in at work and on the job site. And a lot of business owners do because there's that you versus them feeling, right? You're pulling, you're cracking the whip, you're pushing, you're crawling along your day, and you just feel like you're by yourself. You have a completely different mentality than they do. They get fired and go get another job in a week, right? It doesn't seem like it's not the end of the world. Your business is your world. Your success as a business owner, that's your identity. You get wrapped up into that, and nobody wants to go bankrupt. Nobody wants to be the guy that went out of business. So that was one huge thing. So I would tell business owners that for number one, the money that not going to make if you don't figure this out is probably the biggest number. You'll never really even want to know how big that number is if you refuse or don't agree that this is going to be a way to unite your team.
Yeah. What kind of business metrics or behavior changes should a company expect after implementing a well-designed, and those are the keywords, a well-designed profit sharing model?
Yeah. So in one of my companies, I saw 300% increase in profit within 18 months. It's just one of the metrics that I saw. We had a company, I have four different ones, and I've implemented profit sharing in all of them and in multiple different industries. And so I've seen a company making $30,000 a month, making $90,000 to $100,000 a month just by implementing profit sharing. And there's a lot that goes into that, right? People are, you can't just break out a spreadsheet one day and be like, this is what we're going to do. And if you work harder and you're smarter, you'll make more money. It takes a leader, right? The business owner has to be a leader, has to be somebody that they're expected. You have to get the donkeys away from the stallions, right? We talked earlier about these high performers don't want to work with these people just checking in for a job site. So you have to put the right people on the right bus and the right seat in those buses and let the stallions do what they do and get the donkeys down the road to be free to work somewhere else.
I once worked for a gentleman who was my first professional job sales manager, and he was an ex-IBM executive. And he always talked about, he said, how would you treat a garden that was your only source of food? Would you pull the weeds? Would you water the soil? Would you fertilize it? Would you give people time to grow? And when you're talking about creating a culture that you have to, like, that it is as a business owner, that your group of employees or team members, that is your garden, that is your only source of food. And to take the extra caution and extra steps and share in that profit, I'm a fan of it. Have you seen a case where profit sharing helped really maybe even shift a toxic culture. Because I mean, I think that's, I mean, you get some weeds out, you keep the good people, or worse, you leave the weeds in there and they drive the good people away.
Right. I was just going to
So
say that. So
talk,
one thing
talk to
I
me a little about that. What's been your experience?
so I've seen when a profit sharing check, a monthly profit sharing check is on the line for a team, they will hold each other accountable. And it's not like a rat you out or snitches all of a sudden everywhere. But when somebody is struggling or someone's just not up to par, my favorite thing about it is new hires, right? So I'm a pretty patient guy, and I've been called an impasse before, where I hire somebody in, I like them, and they're sweet and they're nice, they're good people, right? And you get them in a role, and if, of course, it's my fault they're in the wrong role, usually typically from the beginning. But
That I can help with.
yes, and they all of a sudden, we're training. Their 30 days comes by. We do a performance review, and then okay, we're gonna make some changes. They get a little bit better. 90 days go by. It's the same story. They're a little bit better, but we used to like drag this on for a year, and then 18 months goes by, and then finally we're like, okay, it's just not working out, right? And we've been kind of getting our butts kicked the whole time. When you have a team on profit sharing, your team helps you make that decision faster because you bring somebody new in. That's cost to the P&L. Your team understands that this person has to carry their own weight, not be a cost to the P&L where it could potentially bring you out of the profit sharing threshold. And so they will help you, and they will help them get there faster. So it's a win-win. They want that person to win. So your new team member walks into a culture of, hey, we're going to win. Whatever you need to do, whatever training you need to do, I'm going to help you get there as fast as possible so you can add to our profit sharing, not take away. It's been one of the huge things that I see. And then as the owner, I can have a meeting, at that 30-day with the team of that new team member and be like, what do you guys think? What's your gut feeling? You spend more time with this person than I do. You're motivated just as much as I do that this person works out and is a, positive contribution to the team, and you'll get real answers. Before I had a profit sharing, people would just, because they had no skin in the game besides their paycheck, was, oh yeah, if they liked them too, then they would bury something or cover it up or not speak
Sure.
up. They don't want to see anyone get fired, and which is destructive, right? It kind of becomes this protected thing. And then the profits go down and they want to know why. Well, before there was profit sharing, and then the company numbers would go down, and then I'm banging the table and what's going on here? What do we got to do? And they're just, well, I don't know. Our overhead's too high. Well, why? Who, what did we do wrong here? What do we need to fix?
You touched on something that I want to ask you to expound on. And you mentioned that the team is aware of what this person costs because we're talking about a cost here on our
Yep.
P&L. And just is this person bringing more value than what they're costing the company? What's been your experience, or what are your thoughts on business owners who might be hesitant to share numbers, certain things that business owners aren't comfortable sharing initially that they should be? And if so, why?
Yeah, I talk about this a lot in my book. This is going to depend on the business owner. And the guideline that I give them is the problem with sharing financials, and the caution that business owners need to have is that people don't understand what they're seeing, right?
That's true.
And that's the first problem. Like, are you going to take a construction superintendent or a car wash assistant manager and put them through the hours of training to understand what a P&L means and what the line items mean, the taxes, the depreciation, all these things that maybe are non-cash expenses to the business? Or what about the things on the balance sheet? We're not talking about the training and education needed to understand that are non P&L cash expenses for a business. So I have, there's a lot of people on my companies. I have 4 of them, and we have leadership teams that do see the actual P&L, but they get training to understand what they're actually looking at. And then the ones and the way that my asset test to kind of figure out who that's going to be is, does understanding the P&L actually help them perform in their role? Right. So, for example, my plumbing service managers do not see the P&L because that doesn't help them in their role. They see gross profit percentages on jobs. They see labor costs, material costs. They see, how much the gas bills are when, we fill up a van. They see those things because that information is vital to their role. And so that's what I encourage business owners to do. If you're a small business owner, say you have a flower shop and you have 4 employees, you probably don't need to share a P&L unless you have a manager and you're kind of absentee business owner that you're doing something else all the time. But that's the asset test that I use. And to create transparency. So that's the challenge, right? You're not sharing the P&L, but you're communicating about numbers because you have a profit sharing threshold that you're paying out every month on. And I encourage them that they can use percentages. I encourage them to share the total revenue of, so that kind of gives everyone a metric. If you're $1 million in sales, and then we do 1.2, that's a 20% increase. So you can talk about 20% increase in sales that's contributed to the profit sharing, or maybe a 20% decrease in sales pushed us out of the profit sharing threshold. And so they understand that sales was the problem, right? Or we botched a job that cost us money to do. And then I would expand on the mistakes that were made, and then the lessons learned, so that we can prevent this in the future as a team and get everybody's heads wrapped around this idea of, all right, we screwed up. Maybe it was a bad estimate. Maybe it was a bad weather thing out of our control. What can we do internally to prevent this problem from happening continuously?
Is there ever an issue? And if there is, how have you advised companies to handle it? And I'm guessing some of the answer has to do with education. But when you start talking about what people feel they deserve, well, why is the owner getting rich off of all of our work and our sweat? And obviously, as a business owner, I can sit there and say, because my house is on the line if this doesn't work, my family's on the line if this doesn't work, you can just go get another job. So there's rewards associated with that risk. There's got to be a balance there in educating and communicating that with key employees or the general workforce. How have you handled that in the past? How do you encourage business owners to handle that?
Yeah, so I'll be honest. I'll tell you how I handle it, and some people find this maybe snarky or extremely direct, but I'm just going to be honest here. Two things: there is a reward versus risk factor, right? That I think in general most people understand, right? If we don't do well, I'm renting an apartment with my 4 kids again, right? So you can go get another job. I'm probably unemployable. Most business owners I feel are unemployable at some point,
Because
and
everybody thinks they're going to just doing that long enough to go get another job, and they don't want to
right.
invest in them. Sure.
Right. And a lot of business owners maybe don't want to hire another business owner because of the personality issues or their ideas and the my way or the highway type things. I don't know. There's that whole risk versus reward thing. The other thing that I say, and I'm very blunt about it, is would you rather work for a broke guy? Do you want to work for somebody that is struggling to make payroll, that is not financially successful to where they can handle the stress, handle the issues? Maybe they need to be able to take off half days on Wednesdays to go to the gym and do some self-care stuff with their family or stuff because of the price that they paid 4 years before you got here to build this opportunity for you. So some people don't like that answer.
I
If you
love that answer because
okay.
I love that answer. And you're also demonstrating that, hey, we're not living hand to mouth here. We need to build a war chest because you think it's not that long ago. There's a whole bunch of business owners that would have loved to have had a war chest when COVID hit and their businesses were shut down. And if they were living, I'm not going to say paycheck to paycheck, or maybe they were living paycheck to paycheck, trying to make ends meet, build their business, scrimp, bootstrap, whatever they had to do. And all of a sudden, government comes in and says, hey, you can't be open anymore. And yes, the PPP helped some of the businesses with their payroll, but that didn't mean that they weren't able to, how are these businesses going to pay their rent? How are they going to pay their loans on their restaurant equipment? How are they going to pay for their loans on their vehicles?
Yeah.
I personally know business owners who were doing very well and all of a sudden out of business and life changed completely, and it wasn't their fault, but they were still had to deal with it. and
Yeah.
and to have that conversation about would you rather work for broke guy or someone who's actually setting aside a rainy day fund to weather any storm so that if unexpected anything happens, you still have an opportunity and I still have an opportunity down the road that wouldn't exist otherwise.
Well, there's two things there. You still have a job, number one, but also what about who is being thinking about the opportunities down the future, right? I've had guys that have been here since day one that, I have one guy, I let tell him the story. He didn't even speak English when I hired him. And now he runs a whole department making an extremely good living. And so there's stories like that is like, if I was broke or eking every dollar out of the company and wasting it, these opportunities wouldn't have been created. Growth is extremely expensive too, and employees don't understand that. They don't see what it takes. If you're doing $1 million a year, what is it going to take to do $1.2 million next year? Who pays for the materials and labor to create that extra $200,000 of revenue? Right? They don't understand that. So there's it's an education thing, like you said, for sure, and it's a trust transparency thing. You have to be a leader that they respect and that they trust in what you're doing. I call it you have to have some level of belief in me that I'm making decisions. You're not going to understand them all. I'm not asking you to understand them all, but you need to understand that overall, you have a belief in everything that I'm doing because I'm in multiple industries and not all my escapades have paid off, right? So I have some losses, but I've had some wins that have been extremely successful that helped funded growth in other areas that people got opportunities that had nothing to do with that particular company because of my cash flow situation to invest in something new or to pour money into something for growth.
So, what are some of the biggest mistakes companies make when they're trying to roll out a profit sharing program?
Great question. I see tons of mistakes. In my book, there's 10 rules. Every single one of those rules are mistakes that I've personally made when setting up a profit sharing. And we didn't get into like the whole progression of the story, but I started profit sharing in the first quarter of 2015. I didn't see an ROI or a real change until middle of 2018. It was 3 years of that I almost gave up, Mason, like 10 times. And 3 years of grinding it out and making changes and communicating and getting feedback over and over and over until I had enough of the wrong things right, where I started to see this shift in where I was getting team members that were thinking, caring, and working like I was, and I was feeling less and less alone and where we were attacking problems together. So a lot of the mistakes that come out, like one of my first mistakes that I made was I did a quarterly profit sharing program, and I teach that it must be monthly. Nobody thinks about a bonus that you're going to get the first week of April for the first quarter of that year. No one thinks about that in January and February. And a good profit sharing program should be influencing the daily activities, the daily thoughts of your team members.
That's a good point.
So I saw once we went to a monthly profit sharing where we were paying a profit sharing bonus or a profit sharing check on a monthly P&L, people were thinking about that the first week of the month.
That's awesome.
That's a huge problem with Christmas bonuses. Yes,
is.
it's a great Christmas party. Everybody's drinking and smiling and laughing, having a great time, but no one thinks about that Christmas bonus or going the extra mile in February or March or April. And it's the same problem with quarterly. In America, most corporations are if they have bonuses or some kind of commission style deal, it's quarterly. And we team members start stressing about it 2 weeks before the numbers are supposed to be turned in, right?
That's a
So
good one.
huge change in the mindset when you go monthly. I've seen project managers that spend 3 hours a day in their car, stop listening to music and start listening to self-help books or some kind or podcast that has to do with their position or their industry, and just becoming a better overall well-rounded individual with knowledge, experience, and just having that. If someone has that relentless pursuit of self-education, it really puts them on a whole nother level in another arena of stallions. The other mistake that I see a lot is two more big ones, is making the payout substantial enough where you're actually affecting your team members' financial needle. When I started out profit, we had a bad quarter one time, but we still made profit. And I shared, and some people in the early days, this is going against a lot of rules, but just to tell you the story, there was a $250 quarterly profit sharing check. And no one gave it back, right? Nobody did not cash the check, but it didn't change their life. They didn't think about it. Maybe it bought them a nice dinner out with their spouse, or maybe it paid 1 month's worth of cell phone bills for the family at the time, but it was wasted money. As the business owner, it would have been better to keep the $250 and use it in the bank, in the company for something else. So we teach that at minimal has to be $1,000 a month. $1,000, depending on where you live, depending on your lifestyle, could be a grocery budget for an entire month.
Sure.
It could be half your rent, or maybe depending on where you live, your entire month's rent or a large portion of your month's rent. It actually changes that financial needle that we think about every month. Going back to the quarterly thing real quick, is nobody thinks about their rent costs every quarter or how much they spend on their groceries every quarter. So why are companies paying bonuses every quarter? You miss that mental connection with your team members' life, with their life. Everything in their life has to do on a monthly cost.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah. The third thing that I see business owners screw up, and if we can hammer on this one a little bit, is making it obtainable. A lot of business owners, they bootstrap this thing. Their house is on the line. They have gray hairs or loss of hair because of it. They've sacrificed baseball games with the kids. They've sacrificed date nights with the wife. They've given so much up for this company that they have this mentality that everything this thing earns is mine. And I want to say they're not wrong. It is all yours. It wouldn't be there because if it wasn't for you. But so what they'll do is, let's say it makes $30,000 a month. They're going to say, well, if we double our profit, then I'll share it. And then they'll do the profit sharing launch meeting. They'll go over some metrics. They'll do some education on, they'll do a 30-minute meeting about the profit sharing program. And it basically sums up as, if you work harder and if we kill it, I'll share some of the rewards with you. And then they walk out. And it's a disaster every single time.
Let me guess. People are like, well, what if we increase it 40% and he's getting rich and we're not, and why, or he's dreaming, that's never going to happen. And now you got a demoralized group that doesn't believe it's achievable. And it's like, why bother? And that's the exact opposite of the impact you're trying to have.
Yep. It's 100% what happens. Your team walks out of there and goes, why even bother? Like, we're busting our butts already. We're already overworked in their minds, right? A lot of times, maybe they're right. They're overworked. They're already putting in extra hours. And now you want us to double profits or do a 40% increase in revenue without increasing costs. Like, and honestly, it's impossible. Like, most companies that I've seen and work with, that's not going to work out. It just won't.
It's going to have the opposite impact. I would think that would have the opposite impact, because even if the owner says, hey, if we double this, then I'll share profits with you. But what if you improve it by 50% or 60% or 70%, or better yet, you don't double it, but you improve it by 90%.
Yeah.
Oh, you're 10% short. Oh, golly gee shucks. How are the employees going to feel about that? Like,
they give up.
We made sacrifices because some of those employees might have missed time with their kids or with their spouse, or missed baseball kids' little league games or family issues and to go for it. And they might have made some sacrifices. I would refer to that as discretionary effort above and beyond what is necessary to keep their jobs. And then to come up with, gee, thanks, I could totally see where that would be absolutely demoralizing and would backfire completely. I would never even bring that up.
Yeah, that's the fastest way to turn a stallion into a donkey. And then now you just hurt the culture. You've created distrust. You've destroyed any unity that you may have, and you're back to square one, maybe even worse.
So for business owners that say, I already paid my people well, why should I share profits too? How do you respond to that?
Well, I can tell you that you'll make more money sharing profits, and you don't want to know the money that you're losing out on by not engaging your team. And I talk about this in a book a little bit, that you still have to pay your team competitively. Like, you still, if a project manager in your area, in your industry, makes $100,000 a year, you need to be at $100,000 a year, if not maybe a little bit over. Like, you don't want somebody, and this goes to like an employee retention. Somebody leaves for $4 more an hour. How much damage does that cause? And you're just being stubborn. You're making money. That's a great team member. The reason why they're not engaged is your fault, not theirs. So that's the first thing you got to do. I don't like commission programs of any sort, because I've never walked into a commission business, either a cell phone or a car dealership or a carpet salesman, who had a great relationship with their team members, because they're competing against each other. And I understand why it creates urgency, but these people are stressed, and because they're on a low salary with the commission pay, it tends to be unethical. They tend to do unethical things because they have to pay rent or they have to buy the baby's diapers. And so that puts them in a really hard spot that is an opposite of unity and teamwork, and a team working together, creating unity to get the same goal. But when you have a profit sharing program that ties the whole team's efforts into the result, then you see people stepping up for each other. Then you see the team members that are lacking get help from each other, because the better that everyone is on the team, the more profit sharing they're going to get. And there's really no downside to having the properly set up profit sharing program if the owner is a good leader and he's respected and has, transparent, and all the things that I talk about in the book that you need to have lined up before you do it.
So how do you address the fear that employees will expect profit sharing even in years when there isn't much profit to go around? Is there a right size or ideal stage of business for profit sharing to work, or can it be applied across the board?
Well, I think it can be applied across the board. And because I've experienced this too. Like, you're going to have a bad month. You may have a bad 4 months in the year. One of my businesses is a car wash, and it's seasonal, right? And I don't care how great your car wash is or where you're located. If it rains 27 days straight, you're not washing cars and you're not making money, right? So I've actually seen this happen before. And one of the ways we combat that is with financial wellness training. I'm a huge fan of Dave Ramsey. There's other guys out there that do this stuff, but I had a guy, this is a true story, working for me at the car wash. He was assistant manager, and we implemented profit sharing there in 2019. Anyway, he joined the team, I believe, in 2021 or maybe 2020, and we had a great summer. Like our rainy season, our area didn't come in the fall. Like we were washing the same number of cars in November as we did in July. The weather was just sunny and perfect, and we were killing it. This guy was cashing profit sharing checks, half of his monthly pay. I mean, he was just making all this extra money. He goes out and buys a Corvette, and 21-year-old, I think he was 20 at the time, actually, has this badass car. And then the rainy season, March rolls around, and the rainy season comes. And, we cut some hours here and there. We it's tough. We're doing all kinds of things. We lower our car wash prices to make enough money to pay rent and make payroll, but we're not making any money. And profit sharing checks stop for like 3 months. And he's upset at me because he can't afford his Corvette anymore. And I'm like, okay, we don't want, it was a lesson learned for me is we need to teach, especially these young people, about saving for that, literally saving for the rainy day fund, and how not only should businesses do it, but we should also do it in our personal life. And when you're on I don't know how many 20-year-old car wash assistant managers should be driving a Corvette, but if that's a priority for you, you need to plan that out and understand that there are rainy seasons and good seasons when you're going to make that money back. So teaching them about budgets, teaching them about financial wellness long term has done a lot to help when the profit sharing may not be there for months on end or a month here and there.
How does profit sharing affect cross functional collaboration between departments or silos?
Yeah, great question. So this is something I've experimented with in the last 2 years. All my companies, so I have one company, it's a construction company, and inside that there's a construction department, a plumbing department, and a restoration department. And we used to do profit sharing per department. So if the plumbing department made their metrics, that those DMs in that team, the decision makers, got profit sharing. And what I saw happening, what was interesting was if the construction company didn't make it, and the plumbing company and the restoration company did, there were team members looking across down the hallway in the same building and being like, oh man, maybe I need to work over there, or look at the culture over there. They're all laughing and clapping and doing great. And we screwed up these couple jobs, or we that were maybe one really big job, and now we didn't get it. And maybe I will need to be underneath that leader. And so we decided to level the playing field a little bit and just try something. So one of my benefits of having all these companies and been doing this for over 10 years is I try things, and I'll try something in one company for a whole year to see how it affects, to see if the numbers change or the culture changes. And we do surveys to measure a lot of that stuff periodically. We tried taking all these departments, the plumbing, restoration, and the construction, and combining the profit sharing into one pool. Where basically, for the company standpoint, financially, it was the same metric, right? But we leveled it out. So if the plumbing company did really, really well and the construction company was a little short, they can make up for that. And by running the numbers from 2 years past before we did it, we've realized that we would actually pay out more profit sharing, and it would help the company help, kind of even, I don't know if even the playing field is the right word, but it would spread the wealth a little bit because,
Sure.
plumbing companies have seasons too. So do construction companies. And what happened was by doing that, I saw way more cross selling. So if I had a construction estimator with a customer walking decks and he mentioned something about water heaters, he would jump on the opportunity. Hey, we do water heaters. Did you know about our sister company over here? I can get them over here. We can do a bid. Show me the water heaters. I'll take pictures and measurements and can get you a quote for that too. And the same thing with our, restoration company. They would get a water leak, right? So they go in there with the dehues and fans to dry it out. Hey, you want me to call our plumbing company to fix the leak? They can be here. I just texted my guy. He can be here in 20 minutes. We're at a property down the street, right? So by combining their efforts into one pool of profit sharing, it actually increased and helped collaboration and sales, and then teamwork and communication with different customers for the different services.
You've mentioned metrics a couple times. Like, what kind of business metrics should a company expect to see after implementing a program like this? I mean, obviously, maybe reduce turnover, maybe lower labor costs because engagement's higher. What are some of the metrics that you typically see positive results from?
Great question. So I see, okay, so I want to talk about costs because a lot of business owners, they always go to revenue, more money coming in. But one of the benefits that I see that I didn't expect or was not even, maybe on my mind or was not the purpose of my profit sharing program in the beginning days was cutting costs down. Of this is a little dollar amount story. The story I'm going to tell you is a true story. And it's not a bunch of money, but this is what happens at my car wash. We mow our own lawn and we have a lawnmower, and once a week the maintenance guy goes out there and mows the lawn. And I drive by that car wash every day, and I probably stop in twice a week. I got a really strong manager over there. We communicate all the time, and he does a really good job. I noticed that the lawn wasn't cut in a couple weeks, and I didn't say anything. And I'm just keeping an eye on it. My wife is a gardener, and she's 50% owner of that car wash, and she's got her white roses out there and it's the things that she likes to see. And I don't know if anyone else pays attention, but it's her thing, right? So a couple weeks go by, they didn't mow the lawn. It's looking pretty raggedy. And then I drive by again, and the lawn's mowed. And so now I'm curious, and I text the manager. I think I called him, and I was like, "Hey, what's going on with the lawn? I noticed we didn't mow it for almost a month." And he goes, "Oh, the lawnmower broke." Internally, we were debating on buying a new lawnmower. It's $300 for a new lawnmower. I said, "Okay, well, $300. It's summertime. We're making money. Probably not a big deal. What happened?" And he goes, "The maintenance guy and two of the assistant managers got together on YouTube and figured out that they could rebuild the carburetor with a $12 Amazon rebuild kit and save the company $288 and increase our profit sharing checks that month." And which is a great story. Yeah. The cool thing about that story is I never got a phone call or an email or a text message asking to do this because that lawnmower was like 5 years old. Okay, it's probably done. Like, buy a new one. It's
So I would
300
think,
bucks.
yeah.
No big deal, right? But my team members, my leaders are thinking like this, kind of that bootstrap mentality that every dollar adds up. And like I said, it's a small dollar amount story, but this is happening with much bigger things, right? Like our cell phone bill, every couple of years, my team on their own accord will audit it and then they'll go shop it. And I've seen one time, this is kind of embarrassing, actually, a $4,000 a month savings just on cell phone and internet costs by
You know what?
negotiating with
That's
other
awesome. Because,
providers.
it's funny that, 'cause I'm sitting here doing the math on the guys like, you know what, if they could do an Amazon kit and, get it done in 2 hours, well, then it did save you a bunch of money, and at least they're thinking that way. Now if it
Right.
took them a
That's
bunch
it's
of
the
hours,
mindset.
then you're wasting dollars trying to save nickels. But the point is, the thing that I take your point is that they're thinking with a bootstrap mentality and as opposed to, no big deal, who cares? Just go do it. It's the company money. They're thinking of it
Right.
as money out of their wallet, which is how a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners think about everything, no matter how successful they are.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing too is people will protect. So I used to have a huge struggle with getting oil changes done on our fleet vehicles because your techs, they don't care. Like they're just working. A van needs an oil change every 5,000 miles. All of a sudden I check it. It's 9,000 miles over.
Ooh,
Ooh, right? That's an engine. That's a $6,000 cost depending on what it is. When you have a profit sharing program in there and knowing that, maybe you're not making $6,000, but you're preventing the cost of a $6,000 engine repair by getting that $60 oil change done on time, right? So that people are motivated to make these things happen all across the board. It's a $12 carburetor rebuild kit or a $60 oil change, but the mentality when you have your
mentality's worth its weight in gold.
that's the lead into the gold right there.
I am so glad that we're having this conversation because I mean, I look back on, oh, I guess it's kind of a cult classic, but did you ever see the movie Office Space?
I don't know. The
It's
show isn't a
early.
show?
There's a movie back like around 2000, probably around 2000. It's been over 20 years.
Okay.
But there's a scene in the movie where there's a worker and he shows up to meet these two consultants and they're sitting across the table from each other and they're productivity consultants. And the employee literally sits across from two consultants and says, it's not that I'm lazy. He goes, I just don't care.
Yeah.
Because it's a problem of motivation. I'll never forget this. It's a problem of motivation. See, if I bust my rear end and our company sends out an extra 10 units, I don't see another dime from that. But if I make a single mistake, I got a whole bunch of bosses to come in and remind me about it and hassle me. And that's my only real motivation, is to not get hassled. That or the fear of losing my job. But the fear of losing my job will only make you work hard enough just not to get fired.
Right.
And I'm sitting there thinking of that mentality. And I understand that that is as relevant today in a lot of businesses now as it was when they made that movie 20 years ago. And I love the work that you're doing, because you are you're answering the question, where's the motivation? The
100%.
motivation,
Yeah.
and you have solved that problem. And I'm sure there's a road, like you said, there's a roadmap to how to do it. You've stepped in the holes and tripped over the speed bumps and figured this stuff out, and you've written a book on it. Can you tell people how to learn more about what it is that you do in your book, and the type of services you provide, and how they can reach out to you if they don't want to learn all that by trial and error, and they're looking for ways to bypass all of that and just get to the outcomes that you're after, which is an engaged workforce and an excited workforce and a conscientious workforce and a motivated workforce, all of those things. Like, sounds to me like your book and the work you do is the shortcut to that. How do they get that?
So the book is on Amazon, called Profit Sharing: The Power of Shared Success. If I had that book 12 years ago, it probably would have saved me 5 years of extra work and hassle. And then I don't even really want to know how much money I did not make because of not having all these rules and this roadmap that I have now. And you can hook up with me on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. The exciting thing, though, Mason, is that book scratches the surface, right? It has the rules in there. It has everything that the three things that you need before you start your profit sharing program. I got a lot of stories in there and examples of all the whys. But if you're serious about it and you want to know everything about profit sharing there is to know, we have a course that we're launching end of this month. And that website that you can find that on is profitx.co. It's not done presently. I don't know when this will be, this recording will hit the air, but that course will be out there. I'll have all those links on my social media, and you can follow us there. We're also going to do a community for people that are profit sharing. They can ask questions, and we'll do a monthly Q&A where we can get on a big Zoom call and people can ask questions, and we can really dig into the weeds to get profit sharing out there done correctly, which is really exciting for me, because my overall vision, Mason, is that my wife and kids and my friends and family can visit businesses. I don't care if it's a doggy daycare, a flower shop, or a grocery store. But imagine going into a business and not being able to figure out who the owner is of that business. I had a client recently tell me, this was like a year ago. He's like, I've been working with your company for 2 years, and my sales rep that I've been dealing with, I didn't know he was not the owner. I thought he was, because the way that he thought, cared, and worked. And so that's the power of a properly set up profit sharing program. And how cool would it be as consumers? You and I go to businesses all the time, of having that same experience in America in small business.
That is amazing. I think back, I'm into cycling, and I bought my first real road bike in 2003. I was so fascinated by it and so interested in it. And I got there at like 7:45 in the evening, had just had dinner. Oh, there's a bike shop here. I walked in, talked to a guy, and I remember this conversation this day. I didn't get out of there till like 8:45. They closed at 8. I had no concept of it. He never, like, it was all about, like, he knew I wasn't there to buy a bike. I was there to complete a triathlon.
Right.
And it wasn't about the bike. The bike was just a tool to help me get the goal. But we're friends to this day. I still have his cell phone number. Like, we're friends to this day. And that was over 20 years ago.
That's
But
awesome.
that's an owner's mentality. And if you can get regular employees to create a customer experience where the customer doesn't feel like, oh, I've noticed that you guys closed, or, oh, we're closing in a few minutes. It's time for us to go. I mean, I spent a few $1,000s on the bike.
Yeah.
An owner realizes that, hey, I'm going to give this guy the experience he needs. Time doesn't matter. This guy's probably going to spend a few $1,000s. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And he did it. But someone that doesn't have a profit sharing mentality or doesn't have an ownership mentality would have said, dude, sorry, we close in about, when I would have walked in, they say, hey, we close in about 15 minutes. Can I help you? That
Yeah.
would have been a way different experience than what it was. And here I am 20 years later. I've purchased all kinds of stuff from him. Still now a personal friend. And I remember that conversation. You can pick up the cell phone and call me anytime, because that was the experience I got from an owner.
Yeah.
And, to be able to get every employee to be like, I don't care about what the time is. I'm here to serve and fulfill a client need, because they understand that mentality, more power to you, man. I love what you're doing, and I'll do everything I can to spread the gospel of your work. And I really appreciate you being on here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mason.